A Burmese ruby does not tolerate carelessness. It demands respect, a steady hand, and light that doesn't lie. I was sitting at my work table in my apartment in Harlem. Outside, a February wind was throwing wet snow against the windows. But here, inside the circle of light from my lamp, everything was in perfect order. Before me lay a 19th century necklace, part of a historic collection, the legacy of my late husband. The stones were dark, nearly black, but when a ray of light caught them at just the right angle, a fire the color of pigeon's blood ignited from within. I picked up the tweezers. My hands didn't tremble. At 64, my fingers were as precise as they'd been at 20, when I first started sweeping floors in the workshop of old Mr. Harvey Eldridge. The silence in the apartment was thick, tangible. For the past 3 years, I had lived inside that silence. Most people would have called it loneliness, pitied the poor mother abandoned by her son. But I didn't need anyone's pity. To me, that silence was a blessing. It meant the absence of whys. 3 years ago, Marcus stopped speaking to me. The reason was simple and ugly. I had refused to sell my husband's collection to cover the debts from his car dealership. The dealership he'd opened with my money, furnished with my money, and methodically sunk with his own arrogance. I remember that last conversation. Marcus shouted that the stones were dead capital, that I was sitting on a chest of gold like a dog in a manger while his business empire was crumbling. I told him calmly that an empire built on someone else's money would crumble regardless. He slammed the door so hard the crystal in the cabinet rattled. After that, not one phone call, not one call.
And you know what? I exhaled. I stopped flinching every time the phone rang, dreading the next request for money. I stopped searching his darting eyes, trying to separate the truth from the fiction. I simply worked. I knew the value of work. I had breathed the dust of grinding wheels for 40 years so Marcus could have the best tutors, a top-tier university, and a starting life free of debt. But the more I gave, the wider the gulf of his appetites became. The doorbell cut through the silence like a scalpel. On the doorstep stood a courier, soaked through and unhappy. In his arms was an enormous bouquet of white lilies. Lilies, the flowers of funerals and guilty husbands. I signed for the delivery, closed the door, and set the bouquet on the table beside the rubies. The scent was cloying, suffocating. There was an envelope inside the flowers, heavy, expensive paper with embossing, the calling card of Marcus's new life. But when I opened it, my professional eye snagged immediately on a detail anyone else would have missed. The text of the invitation had been written with a cheap ballpoint pen that smeared and left blotches. Mom, let's forget the past. I was wrong. home for dinner tonight. I want to show you the house and make things right. Chantel's making duck. We'll see you at 7. I ran my finger over the letters. The pressure was heavy, nervous. The paper was worth a small fortune, but whoever had written on it had grabbed the first pen within reach. Dissonance. Contradiction.
In the jewelry trade, if the setting is platinum, but the stone is sloppily secured, it's a fake. Life works the same way. He didn't just want to make peace. He needed something, and he needed it urgently. I glanced at the clock. 5 in the evening. I had 2 hours. I didn't rush around the apartment looking for something to wear. I chose a sharp charcoal pantsuit, elegant but practical. I wasn't dressing for a celebration. I was dressing for negotiations. I went to the safe and took out a small velvet box. Inside was my primary defense, a jeweler's loupe with 10 times magnification. I never left home without it when I was meeting with stones or with people who like to throw dust in your eyes. I paused, then returned to the safe. My instincts, honed by decades of assessing risk, spoke up quietly but firmly. Marcus was inviting me, after 3 years of silence, right now, at the same time the real estate market was in turmoil and his dealership was by all accounts in debt again. I reached into the back of the safe and pulled out a heavy velvet pouch. Inside lay a replica of one of the collection's large emeralds, a lab-grown stone I had made years ago as a museum display duplicate. It was beautiful, but to an expert, it was worthless. I weighed the pouch in my hand. If they were expecting me to arrive with an offering, I shouldn't disappoint them. Let them believe I was prepared to pay for love. I tucked the pouch into my handbag beside the loop. The snap of the clasp sounded like a gun being cocked. The drive to the gated community where Marcus had bought his house, on a mortgage he was almost certainly planning to pay off with my money, took an hour. Outside the windows, the gray suburban landscape slid past. High fences, security cameras, the cold gleam of glass and steel. There was no warmth here. This place smelled of money that hadn't finished being laundered. I pulled up to the security gate. The guard checked his list and lazily waved me through, opening the barrier. I drove slowly down the immaculately cleared road. Marcus's house was at the very end of the street, a pompous concrete cube of floor-to-ceiling windows. Lights burned in every room, creating the illusion of celebration and warmth. But that wasn't what caught my attention. 2 houses before my son's mansion, parked in the shadow of tall spruce trees, was a black sedan. The car was spotlessly clean despite the slush on the roads, its windows tinted pitch dark. No license plates, no identifying marks. I knew that car. Or rather, I knew that type of car. In New York's jewelry world, there is the bright side, salons, exhibitions, auctions, and there is the gray side, pawn shops on the outskirts, fences for stolen goods, private meetings in the back rooms of restaurants. I had seen this car 6 months ago outside the office of a well-known middleman our circles called the Vulture. He specialized in buying jewelry from people in trouble at a quarter of its value. My heart didn't skip a beat. It slowed, shifting into a mode of cold concentration. The Vulture doesn't come to family dinners. The Vulture shows up where he smells carrion. I killed the engine but didn't get out. I sat in the darkness of the car, gripping the wheel in my leather gloves, staring at the lit windows of my son's house. The puzzle was coming together. A cheap pen on expensive paper, a sudden invitation, A black sedan hiding in the bushes. This was not a reconciliation. This was an ambush.
I took a deep breath, straightened my coat collar, and opened the car door. The air was freezing and smelled of pine. I stepped toward the house, knowing that from this moment on, every gesture, every glance had to be calibrated to the millimeter. I was not walking toward my son. I was walking into a war. I climbed the wide front steps, feeling the marble beneath my boots give off a tomb-like chill even through the soles. The door swung open before I could press the bell. Standing in the doorway was Glenda. Not Marcus, not Chanel, but Glenda, the woman who had worked in my home for 10 years until my son lured her away with a promise of twice the salary, which I was certain he'd been withholding for months. Her face was pale as a sheet. Her eyes darted around. Her hands twisted her apron nervously. "Mrs. Johnson," she said, too loudly, reaching out to take my coat. "How wonderful to see you." But when she leaned in to take the cashmere from my shoulders, her fingers clamped hard around my forearm. She brought her mouth to my ear, pretending to straighten my collar, and her whisper landed like a gunshot. "Don't go in there. There are guests you don't want to meet. Please, leave right now. Run, Mrs. Johnson. For God's sake, go." Something clicked inside me. Not fear, not panic. It was the sound of a chamber sliding into place. I didn't flinch. I didn't change my expression. I held Glenda's gaze for just 1 second. In her eyes, genuine terror. She was risking her job, possibly her safety, to warn me. I gave a single short nod, the barest movement of my chin. "Thank you, Glenda," I said, loud and even, making sure my voice carried into the hallway. "I think I left the gift in the car. I'll be right back." I turned on my heel with the same composure I used when walking away from a deal I didn't like. Steady, unhurried. I descended the steps, feeling someone's gaze on my back from the living room window. I didn't run. Victims run. I walked to the car at the measured pace of a woman who simply forgot a box of chocolates. I got behind the wheel without rushing. I started the engine, slowly turned around, and pulled back behind a dense wall of decorative spruce trees that hid me from the house's windows, but left me a perfect sightline. I cut the engine and turned off the headlights. The car went dark and silent. From the glove compartment, I retrieved not chocolates. I retrieved a powerful marine-grade binocular I always kept with me. An old appraiser's habit. Sometimes you need to examine the detail of a facade or the crest on an estate gate without leaving your car. I raised the lenses to my eyes and focused. The living room windows were like an open stage. The curtains weren't drawn. One more sign of their arrogance. They were certain the show was going according to plan. 9 minutes. That's exactly how long I sat in the frozen silence, watching the house that was supposed to become a family home and had instead become a trap. On the 9th minute, the heavy front door opened. A man stepped out onto the porch. He was in shirt sleeves despite the cold, drawing hungrily on a cigarette. I recognized him instantly. Even without the binoculars, I would have known that hunched silhouette and the way he held a cigarette between thumb and forefinger, like a dart. Dave the Vulture Harris, a man whose hands had processed tons of stolen gold and stones with shadowy histories. If he was here, this was not a family dinner. This was a transaction. And the commodity in that transaction was supposed to be me, or rather, what I kept. They didn't just want to talk. They wanted to back me into a corner, apply pressure, possibly intimidate me into giving up the access codes to the bank vault where the historic collection was stored. The Vulture doesn't work on credit. If he was here, He was expecting delivery tonight. Now. My breathing stayed even. Anger? No. Anger is a hot emotion. It clouds your eyes. What I felt was absolute cold, like liquid nitrogen. It burns away everything unnecessary and leaves only the essence. At that moment, Marcus stepped out onto the porch. My son, the boy I had read bedtime stories to, the teenager I had pulled out of trouble, the man who now stood beside a criminal and laughed.
I adjusted the focus of the binoculars. Marcus was grinning. He was talking to the vulture, gesturing broadly, like a man boasting about a successful hunt. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a fat yellow envelope. He handed the envelope to the vulture. The man glanced inside casually, smirked, and patted Marcus on the shoulder. Warmly, patronizingly, the way an owner pats an obedient dog. That gesture was the last straw. That envelope held a down payment, or documents, or worst of all, my personal information. Marcus had sold me before I'd even crossed the threshold. He was already celebrating his victory, convinced that his old mother would melt out a bouquet of lilies and hand over everything she had, just to hear her son call her mom again. They saw me as a foolish old woman whose love was a weakness. They had forgotten who taught them to tell a diamond from a cubic zirconia. They had forgotten that I could see through more than stones. I lowered the binoculars. The decision was made. There was no room left for doubt, for hope of error, for maternal mercy. In that second, Marcus ceased to be my son. He became an adversary, dangerous, unprincipled, but predictable. I took out my phone. I didn't call the police. The police meant time. It meant paperwork. No body, no case. I needed to move faster and sharper than that. I dialed Leonard. Leonard Brown, former lead detective on major crimes, now head of security for an insurance syndicate. A man who knew everything about New York's jewelry world that never made the papers. We had been friends for 30 years. He was the one person who understood. In our business, trust is worth more than the purest diamond. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Helen. His voice was husky, surprised. What happened? Do you know what time it is? I know, Leo. My voice was calm and businesslike, as if I were discussing the cut of a topaz. I need your help, right now. Write down a plate number. I gave him the details. Run the owner and find out who in the city is looking to buy large emeralds. Urgent. Helen, what have you gotten yourself into? The worry in his voice was immediate. Not me, Leo. My son. He just made a deal with the devil, and I'm going to void that contract. I ended the call. My hand moved to the glove compartment. Inside was a recorder, professional, digital, the size of a thumb drive. I switched it on, checked the battery, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Now I was ready. I put the car in gear. It moved quietly forward. I didn't head away from the development. I turned toward the exit, but not to flee. I needed time, and I needed a position from which to strike the first blow. The game had begun, and I was the one setting the rules now. I pulled out through the gate and turned onto the highway. 2 kilometers away, there was an all-night diner at a gas station. Anonymous, sterile, buzzing with neon. The perfect place to disappear. I took the corner table, back to the wall, facing the entrance. I ordered black tea, no sugar. When the waitress left, I placed my phone face down on the table.
My first move was made. The call to Leonard had set a mechanism in motion that could no longer be stopped. But I needed facts. Hunches are for amateurs. Professionals work with evidence. The phone buzzed 4 minutes later. Leonard was fast, as always. Helen, his voice was alert now, taut. You nailed it. That black sedan showed up on cameras outside a pawn shop last week. The vulture, he's in trouble. Serious trouble. He owes serious people in Chicago. They gave him until the end of the week. And what does he need? I asked, stirring a spoon through sugar that wasn't there. Large stones. Liquid ones. Emeralds, Helen. He's looking for emeralds above 10 carats. Clean, Colombian or Ural. Word is, he's already found a seller who promised him the Winter Star. I went still.
The Winter Star? That wasn't just a name. It was a unique Ural emerald from my husband's collection. 22 carats. Flawless clarity. I'd never offered it for sale. I hadn't even shown it to anyone in the past 5 years. Only a handful of people knew it existed. Marcus was one of them. He sold something he doesn't have, I said quietly. Looks that way, Leonard agreed. Helen, if the vulture doesn't get the stone tonight, he's not going to stop and figure out who's to blame. He'll take what he's owed by force. Go home. Lock yourself in. I'll send some people. No, Leo, don't send anyone. Not yet. I need to know everything first. I hung up. The picture was coming clear. Marcus had simply wanted money. He was desperate. He'd promised a criminal a stone sitting in my safety in order to save his own skin. And this dinner wasn't just a trap. It was his last play. But one question remained. How would he plan to get into the safety? Only I knew the codes. The biometrics were mine alone. The keys were always on my person. Unless... A cold feeling crept down my spine. I dialed a second number, the security firm Bastion, which guarded my salon and vault. Officer Peter speaking. Good evening, Stephen. This is Helen Alexis Johnson. Has anything come up? The alarm is quiet. Everything's fine, Mrs. Johnson. Is something wrong? I'm just reviewing my records. Can you tell me who accessed the salon in the last 3 days, outside of business hours? Let me check the log. Keys clicking. Yesterday, nobody. The day before. Oh, well, you were there yourself, Mrs. Johnson. The room tilted slightly. I was? I asked, keeping my voice steady. What time? 9:40 p.m. with a notary. You called ahead yourself. Said you were coming to sign transfer documents for the property. You were inside about half an hour. I closed my eyes. 2 days ago at 9:40 p.m., I was sitting at home watching an old French film and drinking tea. I had not left my apartment. Stephen, my voice went cold. Describe what I looked like. Like usual. Coat, hat, dark glasses. You had a scarf wrapped up high. Said your tooth was hurting. Couldn't talk much. The notary did most of the talking for you. Of course. Classic. Toothache, scarf over the face, dark glasses, and a stand-in. Or simply a woman who resembled me. A voice can be faked over the phone or spliced together from old recordings. Modern technology makes that easy enough. So they hadn't just tried to steal the stone. They had already stolen my salon. They'd forged my signature, brought in a substitute, and transferred the property. Stephen, who was the notary? There should be a record. Yes, of course. Let me see. Derek Smith. License number? I don't need the number. I cut him off. Thank you, Steve. You've been a real help. I ended the call.
Derek Smith. I remembered him. A scrawny, perpetually sweaty kid who'd gone to school with Marcus. Marcus used to copy off his math tests. In exchange, he protected Derek from the kids who picked on him. Now Derek had grown up, become a notary, and was repaying old debts by forging documents and certifying fraudulent transactions. The anger was gone entirely. In its place, crystalline clarity.
This wasn't just betrayal. This was destruction. They planned to take everything from me. My life's work, my property, my husband's legacy. And most likely, after this dinner, I was supposed to either disappear or end up in a nursing home with a diagnosis of dementia so that no one would believe my claims about the theft. This was murder. Slow, social murder of one's own mother. I took a sip of the cold tea. It was bitter. They thought I was a helpless old woman. They thought I wouldn't find out until it was too late. They thought they were playing chess against a pigeon. They were wrong. I had sat down to play against a grandmaster without knowing the rules. I opened a banking app on my phone and checked my accounts. Everything's still intact. For now. But it was only a matter of time. If the salon had been transferred, the accounts would follow. I needed to act. Not tomorrow, not in an hour. Now. I stood up, left a bill on the table, and stepped out into the freezing night. Marcus was waiting for his mother at dinner. Very well, his mother would come. But she wouldn't be bringing forgiveness. She'd be bringing a reckoning.
I got in the car. Before turning the key, I took the velvet pouch from my handbag, the fake emerald. I held it up in the glow of the streetlight. The glass caught the light beautifully. Bright, brilliant, deceptive. The perfect bait for greedy rats. I started the engine, but first, one more stop. Derek Smith's notary office was downtown, but I knew where he lived. Marcus had let it slip once that Derek had bought a condo in a new complex not far away. I needed to make sure the weakest link in their chain was the first to crack. The car moved. I drove calmly, obeying every traffic law. There was no need to hurry. The trap was already set, and they were standing in it with both feet. All that was left was to pull the string. My phone rang the moment I parked in a dark alley across from Derek Smith's notary office. On the screen, Marcus's photo, a grinning boy in front of the Eiffel Tower, a picture from 10 years ago. Right now, that boy was tying a noose for me. I exhaled, relaxed the muscles of my face, let my shoulders drop slightly, stepping into character. I pressed accept. "Mom!" His voice was thick with performed concern, enough to turn my stomach. "Where are you? We've been worried sick. The duck is getting cold, the wine is open. You promised to be here by 7. I let a beat pass. Exactly the kind of pause an older woman needs to collect herself. "Oh, Marcus." I let my voice wobble. I added a thread of confusion, a trace of mild panic. "Honey, I ran into the worst trouble." "What happened?" The concerned son tone snapped into irritation instantly. "Where are you?" "A flat tire. Can you believe it? Hit something sharp right on the way out of the city. I'm on the shoulder waiting for the tow truck. They said 30 minutes. I was so upset I couldn't even call right away. My hands were shaking."
Silence on the line. I heard him cover the microphone, but modern phones pick up even a whisper. "She got a flat tire, waiting on a tow truck, 30 minutes, Marcus muttered to someone nearby. Then I heard Chanel's voice, sharp and toxic as broken glass. "Tell her to hurry up. The vulture's getting antsy. He's not waiting all night. She can leave the car and grab a cab." I smiled, not the warm smile of a grandmother,
A cold, predatory one. They weren't even bothering to hide it, using his nickname right in front of me, certain the old woman couldn't hear or wouldn't understand. "Mom," Marcus said again, his voice shifting to something smooth and honeyed. "Don't worry. The most important thing is you're safe. Listen, what if I call you a car service? I'll cover it. Just leave the car. We'll sort it out later." No, sweetheart," I fussed. "How can I leave it? That's your daddy's car. It means everything to me. I'll wait. There's a good mechanic on his way. I'll be there soon, I promise. Don't start without me." "We'll wait for you, Mom." Impatience and contempt threading beneath the words. "Just make it quick. We've got a surprise for you." "A surprise?" I asked, with the delight of a child. "A big one." A pause, and I could practically feel him smirking. "Don't you worry about that car, Mom. After we talk tonight, you won't have to think about money problems or old clunkers anymore. Everything is going to be brand new for you." "Thank you, sweetheart. You're always looking out for me." I hung up.
Everything brand new, of course. A new kind of broke, a new kind of alone. I looked out the window. Directly across the street, the door to the notary's office opened. Derek Smith stepped out onto the front steps. He wore an expensive coat that hung wrong on him and kept glancing around nervously, a leather portfolio clutched to his chest. I raised my phone and started recording. Derek came down the steps and walked toward a silver SUV parked nearby. I zoomed in. I recognized the plates immediately. That vehicle was registered to Marcus's dealership. I'd seen the paperwork back when I was still helping him with the books. Derek got in. No one was behind the wheel. So the car had been given to him for his use, or his payment. I filmed him starting the engine, pulling out of the space. Clear, steady footage with timestamp and geolocation. There it was, the link in the chain. The notary who processed the fraudulent transaction driving away in the chief beneficiary's vehicle. Direct connection, conflict of interest, conspiracy. For any court, that would be enough to void any signature. But I didn't want a court. Not yet. I wanted a complete demolition. I sent the video file to Leonard in a message. "Notary in Marcus's car, 7:15 p.m. Add to the folder." His reply was instant. A thumbs up. Leonard was working. The folder was getting heavier. I leaned back in my seat. The car was warm, but I was shaking. Not from cold, from adrenaline. They thought I was on the shoulder of a road crying over a flat tire. They were laughing at me, dividing up my life while the duck went cold. Chanel was probably already mentally trying on my earrings. Marcus was calculating how many debts he could clear from the sale of my salon.
Their overconfidence was their greatest enemy. They had been so long treating me as a resource, a function, an ATM with ears. They had forgotten I was a human being, and I was smarter than them. 30 minutes. I gave them 30 minutes head start. Let the vulture grow impatient and start pressing Marcus. Let Chanel start hissing at her husband. Let the air in that house heat to the point of combustion. When I walked in, they needed to be strung tight. Nervous people make mistakes. I started the car. This time I was genuinely driving to them. But not as a victim walking to the slaughter. I was going as an inspector, arriving unannounced at a warehouse where she knows, with absolute certainty, the theft is in full swing. I glanced at the velvet pouch on the passenger seat. My entry pass. My Trojan horse. "Well then, children," I whispered into the empty car. "Is the duck getting cold?"
Good. I'm about to serve you a dinner you'll burn your lips on even trying the water.
I stopped again about 2 miles from the entrance to the development. I needed to make one last check. Instinct is useful, but numbers never lie. I took the tablet from my bag. Marcus always laughed at me for being stuck in the past with my loops and scales. But there was one thing he didn't know. I had always kept pace with the times when it came to security. 2 years ago, I had installed a remote access program on my shop server. A backdoor that no one knew about, not even my head accountant. I entered the password. The screen flickered and opened a database. I began scanning the registry of documents uploaded in the past 24 hours. If they had run a transaction through the notary, the traces would have appeared in the digital property registry, to which I had access as the owner. And I found it. The file had an innocuous name: Loan Agreement. Scan. I opened it. The document loaded slowly, as though reluctant to show me the truth. But when the text appeared on screen, the breath went out of me. Not from fear, but from the sheer scale of the cynicism. This was not a deed of sale, as I had assumed. This was a loan agreement, a massive, monstrous loan at predatory interest rates. The lender was a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, but I knew exactly who stood behind companies like that. Gray capital, laundered through real estate. But the worst of it was in the collateral section. Listed there was not just my jewelry salon on Fifth Avenue. There was my Harlem apartment, my house on Long Island, even the garage where my husband's old Cadillac sat. Marcus had pledged everything, every single thing I owned. I scrolled to the end of the document. The first payment was due within 48 hours of signing. If the funds weren't received, full ownership of all the property would pass to the lender without court proceedings by notarial enforcement order, issued by Derek Smith. 48 hours expired tomorrow morning. I stared at the numbers and watched them arrange themselves into a nightmare mosaic. This dinner was not an attempt to squeeze money out of me. This was the finale. They needed the stones from the historic collection not to sell them. They needed them as interest payments to stall the asset seizure just long enough to legally push me out onto the street. They weren't just robbing me. They were planning to make me homeless, a destitute old woman who would die by the side of the road while they lived in my apartment and spent down the money from selling my life's work. This was murder. Slow, social. A son killing his mother one document at a time. My finger slid across the screen to the last page, the signature page. There, beside the sweeping scrawl of the lender's representative, was my signature. Helen A. Johnson. I stared at it, and a cold sweat broke across my skin. This wasn't just a forgery. It was a perfect copy. Too perfect. Every characteristic mark was there. The curve on the H, the short downstroke at the end, even the angle of the letters. No handwriting analyst would have spotted it at first glance. But I knew I'd never signed this. Where had they found the sample? I went through every document Marcus could have seen. Powers of attorney? No, I had revoked those 3 years ago. Checks? I always sign those short. And then it hit me. I opened my photo gallery, scrolled down to the archive folder. 5 years ago, Marcus's birthday. I'd given him a rare watch and a card. A large,
beautiful handmade card in which I'd written my wishes and signed my full name, formally, lovingly. I found the photo of that card and enlarged the signature. Identical.
They hadn't just copied it. They had scanned my greeting, cut out the signature I had written full of love and good wishes, and pasted it into a document designed to destroy my life. What I had written in love, they had turned into a weapon against me. Something inside me died completely in that moment. A part of my soul that had perhaps, somewhere very deep down, still hoped this was a mistake, that Marcus had gotten lost, that someone had forced him. That part burned to ash. What remained was a scorched plain. And standing on that plain was the monolith of my resolve. I was no longer a mother. I was a jeweler who had found a fatal flaw in a stone. And if a flaw cannot be corrected by polishing, the stone must be broken to save what still has value. Marcus and Chanel were the flaw, a deep crack threatening to bring everything down. I closed the tablet. My hands were steady. My heart beat evenly, powerfully, like a hammer on an anvil. "So," I said aloud, and my voice in the car came out flat and hard. "You wanted to take everything? You'll get everything you deserve, right down to the last cent." I forwarded the loan document to Leonard. Message: they pledged everything. Deadline tomorrow. Execute hurricane. Leonard replied in under a second. Received. Team is moving. Waiting for your signal. I put the tablet away. Straightened my hair in the rearview mirror. A woman with steel gray eyes looked back at me. No tears. No fear. Only cold calculation. I shifted into drive. 5 minutes to Marcus's house. I wasn't going to dinner. I was going to an execution. And tonight, I was the executioner. The gate opened silently in front of me, as though welcoming in a predator. I drove into the courtyard and parked directly at the front entrance, next to Marcus's SUV. The Vulture's black sedan was nowhere to be seen. Tucked into the garage, probably, or around back, away from prying eyes. I stepped out of the car and put on the mask. Soft smile, slightly moist eyes, loose shoulders. I was the embodiment of forgiveness. A mother returned to her prodigal son. The door opened. Marcus and Chanel were on the step. "Mom!" Marcus threw his arms wide and came toward me. He hugged me hard. Too hard. I could smell his cologne, expensive and sharp, and beneath it, the scent of the fear pouring off him in waves. "Finally, we were so worried." "Forgive me, baby," I murmured, letting him hold me. "Old age is no joke. Completely lost my head over that tire." Chanel followed. She wore a fitted dress and a smile that stopped well short of her eyes. "Helen Alexis, how wonderful," she sang, kissing the air beside my cheek. Come in. You must be frozen. Everything is ready." They led me to the dining room. The table had been set with deliberate extravagance. Crystal, silverware, candles. In the center, the duck they'd been so anxious about. But I noticed there were only 3 place settings. The Vulture wasn't expected at the table. He was somewhere close, in the shadows, waiting for his share. The entire dinner was theater. Marcus kept refilling my wine glass. I only pretended to sip. Chanel asked about my health, the weather, old acquaintances. They were sickeningly attentive, cloying in their courtesy. "Mom," Marcus said suddenly, setting down his fork,
His voice went quiet, searching. He covered my hand with his. I wanted to say, I was a fool for those 3 years. I'm so sorry. Chanel and I realized that family is everything. Money comes and goes, but there's only one mom. Chanel dabbed at dry eyes with a napkin.
Yes, Helen Alexis, we want to start fresh. I watched them and felt a wave of revulsion rising inside me. They were playing on the holiest feelings, using the words family and mom as skeleton keys to my safe. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed them, wanted to believe them. But I knew. I've been doing a lot of thinking too, I said, and let my voice catch, deliberately. I realized I was too hard on everyone. Money, stones, what good are they to me in the grave? I want to see you both happy. Marcus's eyes widened. A predatory glint crossed him. He exchanged a glance with Chanel. She took the bait. Mom, what do you mean? He asked carefully. I reached into my handbag. Slowly, with trembling fingers, I produced the velvet pouch and set it on the table. The heavy velvet made a dull sound against the tablecloth. The room went silent, thick enough to cut. They stared at the pouch the way starving wolves stare at meat. I brought you a gift, I whispered, as a gesture of peace. I know things are hard for you right now, and I decided it's time the collection did something for this family. I loosened the drawstring and poured the contents into my palm. Green fire ignited under the chandelier. The winter star, or what they believed it to be. 22 carats of deep, saturated color. Perfect cut. The stone played, shimmered, hypnotized. It was my finest work in the art of imitation. A lab-grown emerald, cut to fool the eye of even a sophisticated amateur. But not a professional, and certainly not a gemological instrument. Oh my God, Chanel breathed. Her hand reached for it involuntarily. Marcus went still. He was staring at the emerald, and I could see the numbers spinning behind his eyes. Millions, debts, freedom. Mom, he swallowed. Is that the star? You're giving it to us? Take it. I placed the stone in Chanel's palm. She closed her fist around it until her knuckles went white. Sell it. Buy a bigger house. Clear your debts. Live in peace. All I want is for you to be happy. I watched them. This was the moment of truth. If there had been even a shred of conscience left in either of them, they would have refused. They would have said, Mom, don't. This is Dad's memory. We'll figure it out ourselves. But they exchanged a look, and in that look was triumph. Dirty, greasy triumph. The triumph of people who believe they've just played a fool. Thank you, Helen Alexis. Chanel was nearly in tears from joy. You have no idea. Thank you, Mom. Marcus stood and kissed the top of my head. You're the best. And then, before he'd even sat back down, he glanced at his watch. Oh, he said, with manufactured distraction. I almost forgot. We're out of wine. There's a bottle in the study. Been saving it for a special occasion. Let me go grab it. He held his hand out to Chanel. Without hesitating for a single second, she dropped the stone into his palm. Back in a minute, he called to me, and nearly ran from the room. I watched him go. He wasn't heading to any wine cellar. He was heading to the study, where the vulture was waiting, where he intended to trade his mother's love for the cancellation of a debt owed to criminals.
Chanel stayed with me. She glowed, chattering on about how well things were going to go now, where they'd travel, how she'd look after me. She was already spending in her head the money she expected to get for a piece of colored glass.
I listened and nodded, keeping the same soft smile. Under the table, my hand gripped my phone. The trap had snapped shut. Marcus had just delivered a fake to a professional. The vulture would have a tester, a loop, experience. 1 minute was all he would need to understand he was being handed a fake. And then the real show would start. "Chanel, sweetheart," I interrupted her gently. "Could you get me some water? My throat is dry from all the excitement." "Of course." She jumped up and headed to the kitchen. The moment she was gone, I took out my phone, started the recorder, and set it on the edge of the table under a napkin. Then I rose and padded quietly to the door leading to the hall. From the study at the far end, voices were already carrying. Low at first, then louder. Marcus's voice, animated, boastful. The vulture's, a deep rumble. And then the sound I had been waiting for. A fist hitting a table. The show had started. I was back in my seat a full second before Chanel came in with the water pitcher. My heart was beating steady as a metronome. 60 beats per minute. The rhythm of a professional who knows the stone is set, the setting is polished, and all that remains is to stamp the hallmark.
Chanel poured my water. Her face radiated self-satisfaction. She thought she'd won. Time to let her dig her own grave. "Chanel," I said, taking a small sip. "You know, I've been thinking about the shop. Maybe it really is time for me to retire." She froze with her glass in hand. Her gaze snapped to me, sharp, assassin. "Of course, Helen Alexis." Her voice went smooth. "You deserve to rest. Why deal with the dust and the difficult clients? Marcus and I will take care of the business. Modernize it." "Modernize it," I echoed. "Like that loan Marcus filed yesterday? At 20% a month?" The smile slid from her face like cheap guilt. The glass in her hand shook. Wine splashed onto the white tablecloth, spreading like a blood stain. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "The loan agreement, sweetheart. The one where you pledged my shop, my apartment, and my house on Long Island. And the separate signature, the one you lifted so cleverly from my birthday card to Marcus." She went pale. Her eyes darted around the room looking for support, but Marcus wasn't there. She was alone. That was for your own good," she burst out, and the mask of politeness dropped completely. The woman sitting across from me now wasn't a caring daughter-in-law. She was a predator cornered. "You're sitting on millions, doing nothing, and we need money to grow. Marcus is talented, he just has bad luck. We would have paid it all back once we got going." "Paid it back?" I said. "After pledging my property to criminals?" "What does it matter?" she snapped. "It all goes to Marcus eventually anyway. You're old. You don't need any of it anymore. We just accelerated the inevitable." I looked at the phone lying under the napkin. The record indicator was blinking red. Confession received. Complicity confirmed. She knew about the forgery. She knew about the loan. She was justifying it. "Thank you, Chanel," I said calmly. "You explained everything very clearly." I checked the time. 9:05 p.m. Leonard should already be in position. I sent him the code word. Stone. And in the study, I knew this.
everything was going exactly as I had foreseen it.
Marcus walked in glowing, set the velvet pouch on the desk in front of the vulture. The man opened it unhurriedly, took out the stone. In the lamplight, the emerald burned green. The vulture was pleased, but he was a professional. He brought out his loupe, brought out a portable refractometer, touched the probe to the stone, and the instrument said nothing. A red 0. Glass. Marcus was probably still smiling, pouring wine, talking about what a generous mother he had. He wasn't looking at the instrument. He didn't know. The vulture raised his eyes, and in those eyes, a verdict. The silence of the house was torn apart by a crash, a dull, heavy sound. Something massive had fallen, then breaking glass, and a shout. Marcus was shouting, not with happiness, with terror. "You think you can hand me this garbage, boy?" The vulture's roar was audible through the oak doors in the long hallway. "You think I'm stupid?" Chanel shot up from her chair. Her face had gone white as chalk. What is that?" she whimpered. I rose slowly, took the phone, stopped the recording, and forwarded the file to Leonard. Then I pressed call. "Leo," I said into the phone, looking directly into Chanel's wide, terrified eyes. "It's time. There's an armed criminal in the house. Threat to life. Move in." I put the phone in my pocket. "What have you done?" Chanel whispered, backing toward the wall. You knew?" "I'm a jeweler, Chanel," I said, drawing myself up straight. "I can tell a fake from the real thing, in stones and in people. You were both cheap imitations." From outside came the wail of sirens. The flash of blue lights cut through the dark beyond the windows, reflecting off the crystal on the table. The gate was rammed by an armored vehicle. The thunder of heavy boots across the courtyard cobblestones was music. I walked toward the study, steady, unhurried. I wasn't going to save my son. I was going to witness his collapse. I pushed open the heavy study door. It swung in easily, revealing a scene worthy of the cheap crime drama my son had been trying so hard to turn our lives into. The room smelled of expensive tobacco, spilled wine, and animal fear. Marcus was pinned face down on the polished surface of his enormous oak desk, his arms wrenched behind his back by the vulture's bodyguard. The vulture himself stood nearby, dark red with rage, squeezing the velvet pouch in his fist as though he intended to strangle my son with it. On the floor lay the shattered remains of a bottle and the emerald itself. In the lamplight, it gleamed with a mocking brilliance, a piece of glass for which lives were being destroyed. When Marcus saw me, he jerked his head up. "Her!" he shrieked, voice cracking. "It's her fault, all of it! She set me up! You hear me, Dave? She's the one who gave me the fake! I didn't know! I swear I didn't know!" The vulture turned his head slowly toward me. His eyes were flat and cold as gun barrels. "Who the hell are you, old woman?" he growled. "Your boy just tried to play me." I didn't look away. I walked into the center of the room and stood there straight-backed, as though I were presenting at an exhibition, not standing in a criminal's den. "I'm a jeweler," I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence it cut the air like a diamond blade. "And this is my son, to whom I gave a gift 30 minutes ago. A family memento, a token of reconciliation.
I looked at Marcus. He was staring at me with a wild mixture of hope and hatred. "You said it was the store," he cried. "You said it was worth millions."
I said it was a gift, Marcus, I said evenly. I said, let the collection serve the family. I didn't tell you to sell it. I didn't tell you to carry it to a criminal while your mother sat at the table drinking water. You decided what my gift was worth. You priced it at the sum of your debt. And you were wrong. You're lying, he shouted, straining against the grip holding him. You planned all of this. You knew. Knew what? I asked in a voice like ice. That my son would try to move stolen goods before dessert was served? Yes, Marcus, I knew, because I know you. The vulture stepped toward me, his face twisted. Lady, I don't care about your family drama. The stone's a fake. The debt still stands, and now it's bigger. Sign over the apartment, the house, everything you've got, or your boy here. He didn't finish. The door behind me blew open with a crash that rattled glass in every cabinet in the room.
"Police! Everyone down! Hands behind your head!" The room filled instantly with figures in black, tactical gear, weapons drawn. Leonard came in behind them, calm, in a plain coat, but with the same commanding walk I had known for 30 years. The vulture was on the ground in seconds. His bodyguard went down beside Marcus, who now lay nose first in the rug by police order. "Dave Harris," Leonard announced loudly, moving toward the vulture as the handcuffs were being locked on. "Long time. Attempted fraud, extortion, illegal trafficking in precious stones. Quite the full house." The vulture spat on the carpet but said nothing. He understood the game was over. Leonard nodded to the officers, who hauled Marcus to his feet. My son stood there rumpled, expensive jacket creased, tie askew, face gray and clammy. He looked at me. His eyes were full of tears. "Mom," he whispered. "Mom, please, tell him it's a mistake. I'm your son. I just got lost. Help me, please." This was his last play. Beg, lean on pity, use the one thing he still believed he had, my love. I walked slowly toward him and took a folded paper from my bag. I opened it. The printout of the loan agreement with its forged signature, and beside it, the log of the notary's drive in Marcus's car.
"A mistake?" I asked, holding it up for him to see. "This is the mistake. Forging your mother's name to put her on the street. Mortgaging the house you grew up in. Pledging your father's life's work as collateral." He stared at the paper, and what little color was left drained from his face. "Mom, I would have paid it all back." "No, Marcus." I shook my head. "You wouldn't have paid back anything. You would have sold me too if someone had made you a good enough offer." I turned to the detective standing beside Leonard. "I have a formal complaint here. Fraud, document forgery, attempted grand larceny. Evidence, the agreement, video of the notary in Marcus's car, and an audio recording from the dining room in which his wife confirms their conspiracy. I'm prepared to give a full statement." "Mom!" It was the cry of an animal caught in a trap. "What are you doing? I'll go to prison. You're sending your own son to prison?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "You put yourself there, Marcus. The moment you decided your mother was just a resource, I simply stopped paying to get you out." They took him away. He looked back, shouting something incoherent, calling me, cursing me, calling me again. I stood without moving, like a stone. There was a commotion at the doorway.
Chanel was trying to slip past the officers into the hall, clutching her purse to her chest. "Stop!" one of the detectives barked. "I had nothing to do with this," she screeched. "I didn't know anything. It was all him. I'm just a wife. I'm the victim here." "Victim?" Leonard said, taking the agreement from my hands. "Miss Chanel Renee Carter, is this your signature as witness on the loan agreement? Terms reviewed. Voluntariness of transaction confirmed. Is that your hand?" Chanel went still. Her gaze found mine. Pure hatred. "Damn you, Helen Alexis," she hissed. "I hope you rot with your stones." "Detain her," Leonard said calmly. "Conspiracy to commit fraud." The handcuffs snapped shut on her wrists. When they were all gone, the study went quiet. Only Leonard and I remained, and the wreckage on the floor. He came to me and put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Helen?" I looked at the empty desk where my fake had unraveled their house of cards. "I'm fine, Leo," I said, and was surprised to find it was true. I just did an inventory and wrote off the dead stock. I picked up the emerald from the floor. It was intact. Good glass. Durable. I closed my fist around it. It was over. I was free. Spring came early to New York that year. The sun, still cold but already searingly bright, flooded my workshop on Fifth Avenue, playing light across the display cases. I sat at my bench, bent comfortably over the clamp the way I always have. In my hands was a 3-carat diamond, an order from a young jazz singer. The stone was excellent, but the setting needed refinement. I loved this work. Loved the smell of polishing compound, the quiet ring of metal, the feeling of coarse material yielding to patience and skill. The trial had concluded a month ago. The loan agreement was annulled as fraudulent. My apartment, my Long Island house, my salon, all of it came back to me, scrubbed clean of the sticky web of lies. Marcus received 5 years. Chanel got 3 years suspended in exchange for cooperation with the prosecution, along with a ban on leaving the state and a substantial fine. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to. I had delivered my own verdict that evening. The historic collection now sat in a bank vault with only my keys, with one exception. Last week, I had sold the real Winter Star, not to criminals, not to middlemen, to an auction house in London. The proceeds went toward establishing a scholarship fund for talented young women jewelers from low-income families, those who have the gift but not the means to cultivate it. Let them build their own empires from scratch, free of debt and handouts. The workshop was quiet. No one called demanding money. No one lied to my face and called it love. I set down my tool and picked up my tea. Earl Grey, hot, fragrant. I took a sip and savored it. The taste and the peace. My gaze landed on the black and white photograph in its frame on the shelf. I'm 25 in that picture, standing at the entrance to my first tiny workshop, apron smudged, eyes blazing. I smiled at that girl. We made it. We took our life back. I picked up the jeweler's loop again, held it to my eye, and looked at the diamond. The stone was flawless. Not a single inclusion, not a single crack. Perfect clarity. The world was finally in focus. and it was beautiful. What do you think? Was Helen right? After all, Marcus was her son, flesh and blood. Many people would say a mother should forgive everything. But where is the line where forgiveness becomes complicity in a crime? If she had forgiven him, if she'd given everything away, how would that have ended? Most likely she would have ended up on the street, and Marcus would have lost that money anyway, because the appetite always grows with eating.
Tell us in the comments, could you have done the same thing with your own child if you discovered a betrayal like this? And one more question. Would you like to know what happened to Helen after this? Maybe she takes on an apprentice who becomes like a daughter to her? Write to us. We read every single comment.